Looks like COVID is finally over. SNL legends mercilessly mock Tony Fauci. While Joe Biden sinks billions into defending democracy in Ukraine, Comrade Zelensky cancels the 2024 presidential election. Jimmy Martin nails it, says Pope Francis has developed his own doctrine. And as the world braces for the next global lockdown, which globalist power player will emerge as public enemy number one? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Michael Matt, and this is the Remnant Underground. Before we get started tonight, I want to thank Charity Mobile once again, the pro-life phone company in America, for sponsoring tonight's show. If you make the switch, now get this, if you make the switch to Charity Mobile, there are no contracts, and for a limited time, new customers who mention the offer code REMNANTTV get a free phone. What's to go wrong there? It's perfect. Free activation, free phone, and free shipping. When you sign up right now, 5% of your monthly plan price goes to the pro-life, pro-family charity of your choice. As some of you know, at least those of you who've been reading the Remnant newspaper for a long time, we don't just take paid advertisements or advertisers here at Remnant TV. It's the same. We only work with companies that we really, truly believe in, people we believe in, companies we support, products that we support, and Charity Mobile is run by the good guys. They don't give a hang about Klaus Schwab's ESGs, which we're going to talk about in tonight's program, by the way. And like all of us here at Remnant TV, they're pushing hard against the whole globalist current. So call Charity Mobile today at 1-877-474-3662 or chat with them online at CharityMobile.com. So the situation in the world and in the church continues to deteriorate. That's the news flash here from Remnant TV. You're welcome.
Has Vladimir Putin been weakened by recent events? It's hard to tell, but he's clearly losing the war in Iraq.
The situation is out of control, I would say, everywhere we look, isn't it? And it's not that we didn't see it coming. In fact, Zelensky, that champion of democracy, has in fact shut down democracy until he says it's okay to vote. There's going to be no voting in Ukraine. You guys hear this?
Чи будуть в Україні наступного року вибори?
Це ж питання глобальне. І якщо ми переможемо, то будуть. Значить, не буде військового часу, не буде війни. А вибори повинні проходити у мирний час, коли немає війни, згідно законодавства.
So to recap, we are currently fighting a war for democracy on behalf of a leader who just casually announced he's happy to end democracy, and our democracy-supporting leaders have no problem with that. In fact, they're strongly for it. Shocked? You shouldn't be. Of course they're for it. You should have seen this coming.
What's weird is we were saying this a long time ago. And, we were saying it right out of the gate. I don't know how to comment on it without sounding like I'm saying told you so, but I guess that's what I'm doing, you know? And I wondered tonight if we could have a little chat about how it is, I'm not just talking about Remnant TV, I'm talking about traditional Catholics in general, how it is that we keep nailing this stuff. Why are we so right about what's going on, you know, in the world, in geopolitics? Well, friends, it's quite simple. It's because for 60, 70 years, we've been seeing how this works from the vantage points of Catholics looking at the Catholic Church, which has been infiltrated, right? The Vatican has been absolutely under siege and infiltrated. So we see how they work. In a way, the Vatican's been leading the charge for a long time with fake news, with pretending to listen to people to change policy, all of these things, changing the Mass, right? The traditional Catholics have been at it for a long time. And the thing that's kind of strange is that traditional Catholics now have been, for the most part, vindicated. Everybody's looking at us and say, yeah, they certainly were right. Look what happened to the Mass. It's gone. Look what happened to the priesthood. It's nearly gone. Look what happened to the papacy. You know? But it's kind of strange because you still have those guys with the gigantic microphones, you know, on YouTube that are just attacking the traditional Catholics constantly for being mean, thinking themselves more Catholic than the Pope, essentially for being right, I guess, too much of the time. And so I want to address it, not because I need to vindicate traditional Catholics, but rather we need to come up with a game plan for what we're going to do, friends. You know, if you want to stick with the guys with the microphone and keep ending up on the wrong side of Ukraine and COVID and vaccines and everything, Then you don't need me. You can switch off and go over and watch those guys. But our track record isn't bad, and it really does have, as we're going to talk about in a moment, it has everything to do with having that Christocentric view of history, having an understanding of Freemasonry, having an understanding of how they infiltrated the Catholic Church, what they've been up to. So now whether they're in the church or in the state, these globalist folks in the New World Order, every time they're moving their lips, we know they're lying. And that's what makes us practically prophetic, because whatever they say, you just do the opposite. You don't believe anything. They're always railing against fake news, but they are the biggest purveyors of fake news in the world today.
You said rich nations should move to 100% synthetic beef.
Yeah, unless we can make the cow zero emission, which, I'm not sure we can. We do need to get rid of those emissions.
We talk about COVID. We talk about what the next crisis is going to be. And if we're not prepared, if we don't start using some of the skills that we picked up along the way, and some of the lessons that we've learned along the way, we're just going to be sucked into it again. So 3 years ago, was that when we did the Davos video, when we first started really going hard after the World Economic Forum?
What if I told you that Bill Gates, Greta Thunberg, Al Gore, George Soros, Prince Charles, and Cardinal Turkson were meeting in the mountains to plot a global new order to be established on the back of the COVID pandemic? An outrageous movie plot? Or is it absolutely true? Donald Trump and the Davos connection, tonight from the editor's desk.
Millions and millions of views in that video, warning people about the Great Reset, using corporations, not government, in order to enforce this New World Order. 3 years ago, we were doing that, right? And yet, even today, every couple of days, we get another comment from somebody saying, you guys are conspiracy nuts, man. If you know about Klaus Schwab, then clearly he's not the guy. So don't try to scare people like this. It doesn't make any sense, right? So I want to ask a few questions that maybe will help drive it home with people what we're living through, what you're seeing right now. Like, for example, do you honestly believe that Bud Light simply made a marketing misstep? Do you think that's all it was? With Dylan Mulvaney and the whole trans thing? It just about shut that company down. They lost billions and billions of dollars. Or are they getting revenue from somewhere else, which is exactly what I said down here is what happens with these corporations. They don't care about market. This is not market capitalism like it used to be. You have to check certain boxes in order to survive in this new reset reality. So you think that Bud Light made a misstep? How about those farmers in the Netherlands?
This is the Netherlands on the world map. It's a small country with a population of just 17 million people, and more than half of the nation's land is used for agriculture. Dutch farmers are also the world's second biggest exporters by value after the United States. Through the usage of the latest technology and other innovations, farmers have made sure that the nation holds on to its tag of tiny country that feeds the world. Now, you'd imagine that such a robust system would be in sync with the government's plans, right? But not quite. Instead, the Dutch government is rolling up its sleeves to forcefully shut down up to 3,000 farms to comply with the European Union rules.
You think they're being shut down by their own government, by the EU, just because of a policy mistake? Like people really do believe in global climate change, and so they're just trying to save the climate. That's all they're trying to do. It has nothing to do with trying to cut off the ability of countries to feed themselves and be independent from globalism. You really think that? Because I don't think very many people in this audience would actually think that now, after all we've seen. Now we have lab-grown meat in the news. Do you think lab-grown meat has anything to do with saving the planet? You see, friends, the answer to all these questions, and we can come up with dozens more, the answer is in the negative, emphatically so. Absolutely not. So Bud Light, for example, Bud Light is working on, you know the answer to this. We've been talking about this a lot. Bud Light is an example of a corporation working, or Anheuser working on its ESG score, right? Environmental, social, and corporate governance.
ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance metrics. It's a kind of social credit scoring system. There are many different ESG metrics that are used all over the world, primarily in the United States, Canada, and Europe. And the goal of all of these metrics, though, is essentially the same. It's to try to get companies to change their behavior by rewarding people with a higher ESG score for performing well in certain categories, and then punishing them for doing poorly in those same categories. The people who support ESG metrics argue that this is an essential part of something they call stakeholder capitalism. They think in order to address something like climate change, in order to deal with problems related to pollution and plastic in the ocean, to deal with social inequalities and racism and all of this other stuff, you have to create a social credit scoring system, or else these businesses are not going to do it on their own. I don't believe that ESG scores are really being used for the reason that they say they are. I think it's mostly about controlling society and about making lots of money and about pushing a left-wing agenda.
Now, the globalists running the European Union, they're using the same criteria to shut down farmers and farms in the Netherlands and anything else that supposedly damages the E in ESG. Environment. Lab-grown meat is in the news, as we said, but it has nothing to do with saving the planet from climate change. Once again, it has everything to do with power and control.
Lab to table has arrived, with the US now the second country to approve the sale of what's called cultivated meat. That's meat grown from live animal cells and cultivated with nutrients and amino acids in a giant vat, kind of like you'd find at a brewery. Supporters say it will help fight climate change by reducing the need for traditional animal agriculture, like cows, which emit greenhouse gases which warm the planet. But hey, how does it taste?
It'll taste exactly as you would expect a chicken to taste. So the part that's remarkable about it is we didn't have to raise and slaughter a chicken to get real chicken meat out of it. And the part that's unremarkable is that it tastes like chicken.
Oh, wow. If it tastes like chicken, it's got to be good.
It tastes like chicken.
But remember now, back to the conspiracy theory. Remember a few months ago we did a show about New York City's mayor cutting out red meat, right, to save the planet? Same show in which you talk about Joe Biden getting ready to rid us all of our gas stoves to save the planet, right?
And I just want to, make it clear to everybody, when we say don't tread on Florida or let us alone, we mean that, including on your gas stoves. You're not taking our gas stoves away from us.
Here's what that conspiracy looks like in the real world, where real people are actually becoming part of the conspiracy.
The woke-ass idiots who run this city are doing everything in their power to destroy it. We have naked men all over this city yesterday, in public, in front of children. We have the most violent, raging crime rate ever. Our city schools produce the dumbest kids, and the woke-ass punks who run New York City are afraid of pizza? You heard of the Boston Tea Party? This is the New York Pizza Party. Give us pizza or give us death. Destroying every small business. That's what this city keeps doing. Can't have a small business. Can't have pizza. New York City is nothing without pizza.
This guy is fantastic. But note what he says there. You can't have a small business, right? Is that a traditional Catholic? I doubt it. We had to kind of, take out some of the colorful language that he was using. I doubt he's a traditional Catholic. He's just a regular guy trying to run a small business. And guess what? It's becoming impossible. You see? Just like we predicted. Woohoo! Like prophets, right? And you know why they're getting rid of small? First of all, it's New York City. And as New York goes, so goes the rest of this country. They're getting rid of small businesses because small business means freedom and independence, doesn't it? And there's not going to be any room for freedom and independence in the globalist future that the lunatics of Davos envision. So they wiped out half the small businesses with their little COVID experiment, right? And now they're finishing the job. And they're doing it, of course, just like Francis is doing everything in the name of equity and inclusion over in the Vatican because he's completely on their side. They're doing all this to small business in the name of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Or, as they call it now, DEI, which looks a lot like DEI, which is Latin for God, but that's just a coincidence. Don't be a kook. So Dei, or DEI, is sort of like God, though, isn't it? Because you got to serve DEI, you got to pay homage to Dei, you got to worship at Dei's altars, even just to make a living now.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion are everyone's responsibility.
DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. That sounds nice and responsible. No wonder all big companies now require employees to get training in it. Eric Smith was a diversity officer at Drew University. Now he teaches at York College. Why'd you stop being a diversity officer?
I just thought it was a useless thing. There's a better way to go about doing this.
Diversity and inclusion.
Useless or not, companies continue to pay big money for trainings.
There's a whole industry now designed to cater to companies looking for a quick way to check that box. In the U.S. in 2020, DEI was a $3.4 billion industry.
Every big company.
They feel like they have to. They have to say something. They have to signal to the world that they're doing something.
Is it effective?
No. In fact, it seems to be doing worse. It seems to be making people less likely to interact with people who are unlike them.
Equity and inclusion have absolutely nothing to do with taking care of the poor people. Thank you very much, Francis. It has nothing to do with including the marginalized, not on the peripheries.
Sempre Gesù va verso le periferie, verso le periferie. E questo ci deve dare tanta fiducia, no? Perché il Signore conosce le periferie del nostro cuore.
Nothing at all to do with any of that. This is a load of fake news. Equity and inclusion are about tearing down exceptionalism, tearing down merit, tearing down achievement, rendering hard work sort of a pointless exercise in futility, right? Penalizing success in business, in religion, whatever, in school, in education, whatever it is. You see, nobody's going to have more than somebody else. And do you know why? Because there's really not going to be more to be had in the world in which they envision, in the new normal. Everyone will own nothing. Don't you see? Everyone will own nothing. Everybody will pay for services, exactly as we said 2-3 years ago. You're going to pay for services like it's an Amazon account or something, or a Microsoft account. You pay for the services first. You don't own the programs anymore. That's what the new world's going to be all about. Services, food, transportation, everything is going to be provided by, you guessed it, Big Brother. So long as we, you, I, have a good social credit score based on measures such as, well, your carbon footprint.
We're developing, through technology, an ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. What does that mean? That's where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So, individual carbon footprint tracker. Stay tuned. We don't have it operational yet, but this is something that we're working on.
Isn't that going to be fantastic? We'll be able to measure our own carbon footprint and then maybe submit it. It's going to be great. Can't wait. Can't wait. That's going to be so fun. Maybe that way, if we have a good carbon footprint, we can access our bank accounts and get food and everything.
We know that this is coming for individuals, that there are some individuals who already have ESG scores and they don't know it. And really, it makes sense, right? If you want to transform society through a social credit scoring system, you can do a lot of that through corporations and banks and financial institutions and Wall Street. But at some point, you probably are going to have to apply that to individuals as well if you're going to take the shift to a stakeholder capitalism system seriously.
Big Brother just kind of watching us, monitoring us, surveilling us. It's so comforting, isn't it? Not at all like those scary dystopian movies that we all grew up watching.
There was no way of knowing whether you were being watched at any given moment. How often or on what system the thought police watched any particular individual was guesswork. It was even conceivable they watched everybody.
Do you get it? That's what I'm saying, friends. We are running out of time. This is a lunatical enterprise, headed up by stark, raving lunatics like Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates. Yeah, they got a lot of money, but everybody now sees them as memes.
Where on one hand, you have this stakeholder capitalist movement, the ESG movement, what Klaus Schwab, the founder of the World Economic Forum in Davos, calls the Great Reset. His words, not mine. That's at one end of the spectrum, calling for the dissolution of boundaries between leaders in the public sector and the private sector to work together to implement their vision for the common good globally. That is what the Great Reset is about. That is spawning on the other side what I see happening every day in this country and in Western democracies around the world, a new movement that I call the Great Uprising. That's standing up to the Great Reset.
Because you know what? The whole thing that we've been through over the past few years especially, it's all about intimidation. It's all about them creating the impression that they are invincible, that no one can possibly stand against them. They have all the power and the money in the world. Right? They used COVID to make that point, to make sure that we all understood they are in charge. These global elites are in charge. The people who want to control what we eat, everything we see on TV, what we hear on the radio, what we drive, the vehicles we drive, right down to the words we use to order a cup of coffee.
Large black coffee.
A what?
Large black coffee.
Do you mean a venti?
No, I mean a large.
He means a venti. Yeah, the biggest one you got. Venti is large.
No, venti is 20.
Danny.
Yeah. Large is large. In fact, tall is large, and grande is Spanish for large. Venti's the only one that doesn't mean large. It's also the only one that's Italian. Congratulations, you're stupid in 3 languages.
Somebody once said that whoever controls the language controls the future. Well, obviously they've been working on that for a long time. I've actually been there. You've been there. In one of these coffee shops, and there's this pierced tattooed thing trying to get you to use a different language just to order a cup. I actually did some. Well, you remember we used to every now and then I would have to pay in Dash rather than dine in Dash because the situation was so uncomfortable that even after I'd paid for my stupid coffee, just like, you drink the coffee because I'm done now. The fun is over, you know. But the thing is, friends, we can fight back as long as we get on the same page of what's going on here. People say it's absolutely impossible. They are too strong. There's nothing you can do about it. But the thing is, we did this. We fought back during COVID. You haven't forgotten that, right? Now everyone's out there making fun of the COVID stupid like there's no tomorrow, now that it's safe to do so.
I miss COVID. I know. Dude, you know what I knew? There was trouble when anyone that came to our country didn't have to get a vaccine. And I go, if you're telling me I can't go to work, but everyone coming in doesn't have to get one, I go,
well, once we found out when Fauci said, okay, I'm sorry, but if you've had 2 boosters and 2 vaccines, you can get and give COVID to another guy who's had 5 vaccines and 4 boosters. What's the difference between a vaccine and a booster? I don't know, just more vaccine, but booster sounds better. Anyway, a guy with 25 vaccines would get and give COVID to another guy with 25 vaccines. That's why I'm introducing the daily COVID shot. Every day you get a shot. By the time you get to your car, you got no immunity, but it's a beautiful 39 seconds.
Absolutely, guys. You're absolutely right. But where were you when it mattered? You know, it's, again, not to make fun of these guys. I'm glad these 2 guys are speaking out now, better late than never. But it shows you once again what people were thinking at the time. Everybody was seeing the same thing that you were and that I was, right? But they were afraid to speak out. Dana Carvey said right there, when he was hearing all about stuff about the boosters and the shots and all that Fauci nonsense, he was like, wait a minute, what's going on? So they were thinking it, afraid to say it. You know, even a fair number of traditional Catholics got sucked in. Good guys, friends of mine, people who wrote for this newspaper either, who took off, and I haven't seen them since, you know. They went all in on COVID. They went all in on the vaccines. My point, anyone can be sucked in, but you just got to make sure it's not you, right? I used to say that back in the height of COVID. Keep your thoughts your own. Keep talking to your family, to your friend, to your priest, or whatever, but keep your thoughts your own. Turn off your TV, as Clapton, remember Eric Clapton famously said, I finally had to just turn the telly off because it was just dominating my thoughts. And then I began to see clearly what was actually happening.
But now I've stopped watching TV. One of the cartoons was a little drawing of a guy interviewing 2 Quakers and saying, how come none of your community has got COVID? And they said, well, we don't watch TV. It's so true, man. There's so much of the sickness is in our heads now.
You see, that's what we have to do. Got to speak out. And if we speak out, if we're not afraid to speak out, then maybe with God's help, maybe even a movement will grow out of our willingness, out of your willingness to refuse to comply, you see? Because it's contagious when somebody does the right thing. That's what we have to do. But you have to be willing to stand alone if needs be. So right now, for example, big news, the origins of COVID.
Hello everyone. Today we have an exclusive and shocking revelation about the coronavirus. Researcher Shan Chao from the Wuhan Institute of Virology has made some astonishing claims. This is the official profile page on the website of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So researcher Shan Chao from the Wuhan Institute of Virology admitted to my interviewee that in February 2019, his supervisor gave him 4 strains of coronavirus and asked him to test and to find out which one had the best ability to infect as many species as possible and how easy it was to infect other species, including human. Shan Chao's team did tests on transgenic mice with human ACE2 receptors, monkeys, and ferrets. The tests were finished in May or June of 2019. Shan Chao even went as far as calling the coronavirus a bioweapon.
Now, follow me on this. That story just came out today and yesterday. But if you read the Remnant newspaper, friends, you would have known all about that story a long time ago. The person called Y in this piece in the Remnant is Chao Shan. Now, Remnant Tokyo columnist Jason Morgan, my good friend, he couldn't reveal his name when we published this piece, but obviously now that Jennifer Zhang has revealed it, so can we here at the Remnant. So the Remnant, as far as I know, was the first to break this story. Kind of the scoop of the decade, isn't it? The true origins of COVID. You know, that's because Jason Morgan, our team, decided to go for it anyway, even though it wasn't safe to do so. Spoke out anyway. So we've been doing it for a long time, and I can guarantee you there's always a payout. There's always a point. You're alone, you speak out, you stand alone, when all of a sudden people are going to go, we got to go back to the truth. That's true. That is the truth, and we got to stand with it. You know, and after Iraq, then we came up with the COVID, and then the vaccines, and then Ukraine, and who knows what's right around the corner right now. But the question is, I'll close on this, are you going to fall for it? Are you going to fall for the next guy on YouTube who says that we need to comply with whatever it is? Remember that one guy? Who was the guy with the beard who's now left the church, I think? Skojak. That guy, Steve Skojak. Remember him? I mean, he was out there railing against the Remnant all the time for our position on COVID and on the vaccines. Lots of people followed him, and now he left the church. He's not even Catholic anymore, you know? So we got to be wary of this, you know, because we're getting tired of taking our marching orders from people on the internet who are respectable, who are well-financed, and they're conservatives, but the only problem is they're conserving absolutely nothing. And they're always leading from behind. You see? Always bringing up the rear and then lecturing the rad trads for being mean or for being more Catholic than the Pope or for being, you know what? How about just for being right most of the time on the issues that matter the most to everybody? How about that? Give that a crack for once. For 75 years, traditional Catholics have been right, and I really think it's high time that the children play acting at Tucker Carlson on YouTube either sort of get with it or get out of the way, right? Because you know what, as I said earlier, a Christocentric view of history along with working knowledge of what's happened to the church, what these people have been up to, these globalists, Freemasons have been up to for a long time, for more than a century, it can make profits out of anybody, even a guy like me. Just pay attention to what they're doing. So I really think that it's time that we stop patting ourselves on the back for going after easy targets. Let's stop going after consequences and finally let's start going after root causes of what's happening around us. I'll give you an example. You're in Minneapolis during Pride, well, I guess it's like Pride Millennium now, I don't know what it is, but they were having a Pride parade in Minneapolis and this video surfaced of some old pervert in his underwear twerking in front of little children. I'm talking about little 6, 7-year-old kids. It was really disgusting. Well, that video went viral, and it picked up something like 5, 6 million views. Now, what this dirtbag wants is for me to come and do a show about him and his undies, and to gasp and to clutch my pearls and to tell you how sick and evil and demonic he is, right? Get all exercised, super dramatic, because I know you're going to agree with me, right? But here's the thing. Guess what happens? If I do that, this guy in his tighty whities wins. That's what he wanted. That's why he went out in the street in his underwear in the first place, hoping to attract the attention of guys like me who were going to make a huge deal out of him, an insignificant old pervert. I'm not going to do that. I'm done doing that now. You know, because he's actually not really the problem, not first and foremost. He's just sort of the bloody sack of stage 4 pus that oozes up from a much more serious cancer beneath the rotting skin of this cadaver we call modern society, right? I mean, think about the case with this guy in the underwear. Parents took their kids to see this guy. He was part of the show. He was part of the parade. They took their kids to see him. They were encouraging this pervert, right? So if we want to protest anything, we should probably protest the parents. But that gets a little tricky, doesn't it? Because if you say the pride folks don't have the right to teach their kids whatever they want, whatever values they want, well, what happens to parental rights in general? What happens to our ability to teach our children our values if we say they don't have any right to teach their values? You see the problem? It gets a little convoluted. There has to be a higher authority than just the state, doesn't there? There has to be a law of God. There has to be God's law. You know, because who are we to say what's right and wrong if there's no functioning moral authority to appeal to in the world today? You know who I blame for the guy twerking in his underwear in the streets of Minneapolis? I blame the guy in Rome, the guy who heads up the most powerful moral authority the world has ever known, right? The guy who refuses, although he's dressed in white and looks like he represents the moral authority of the popes of the past, he refuses to talk about moral theology, doesn't he? He refuses to talk about God's law. He wants to listen, tolerate, and have equity and inclusion and diversity for everybody, just like they do. Right? I blame Francis, therefore, for hoisting the white flag of surrender to the world, the flesh, and the devil. And you know what? Father Jimmy Martin is absolutely right about Francis.
There is a 2003 document from the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith against same-sex unions, and the Pope is obviously saying he sees things a little differently. It's momentous because he's saying it as Pope. He said it before as Archbishop of Buenos Aires. He's saying it on the record, and he's being very clear. It's not simply he's tolerating it, he's supporting it. Well, I think one thing it says is that the bishops, who are many in different countries, who are violently against civil unions, are going to have to rethink their positions. You know, you often have bishops in the United States and especially in places like Poland, who say that they are a threat to traditional marriage. Now you have the Pope saying he supports them, and so they're going to have to rethink what they're talking about. And he has, I know, for a fact, he has friends who are LGBT. He speaks to them. I spent a half an hour with them last year speaking about LGBT issues, so he's well informed, and he may have developed his own doctrine.
The Pope has developed his own doctrine. That's incredible. That's an incredible admission. And you know what? Finally, I can agree with Jimmy Martin about something. He's absolutely right. Francis has indeed developed his own doctrine. And it's his abandonment of authentic Catholic doctrine that is the overarching problem today. It's the problem behind every single evil in the world today, friends. This I believe with all my heart. He's the problem. Not even the bishops. You know what? Because the bishops are obeying him. He's in charge. He's the problem. He's the one who's responsible for all of it. He refuses to do anything to save the children of the world from this demonic influence, this scourge that's covering the face of the earth, right? Why would you blame bishops? Why would you blame some moron in his underwear? I blame Francis for refusing to recognize everything that we're seeing right now for what it is, a war on the church founded by Jesus Christ. We hold Francis accountable because until traditional Catholic theology, liturgy, philosophy, and family life are restored, everything else will continue to go to hell, and there's not a damn thing any of us can do to stop it, so long as Francis does what he's doing to the church and to the world. No political movement can change this. No politician can save us. No guy on YouTube with a gigantic microphone. Francis has betrayed the church. Francis has betrayed us. And most importantly, Francis has betrayed Christ with what Jimmy calls his new doctrines. And this, friends, is why every man, woman, and child on earth has an obligation before God himself to pray for Francis's conversion and to resist him to his face.